Time will tell. It is the inevitability of time that Meghan cannot escape, that none of us can. There's all this speculation about the Invictus Games for a reason, because we're going to see if that's what finally brings this fantasy, dream, nightmare to an end. The fantasy will not hold forever. It never does. It'll work for a while, and he got to be the hero, and she got to be the princess. He slayed the dragons. They rode off into the sunset, or to Canada. See, it doesn't matter how fantastical a fantasy is. Reality will always destroy it. Hey guys, Prince Harry and Meghan are coming up on a moment that is going to be significant, and no matter what happens, Meghan Markle is terrified. The Invictus Games seemed like somewhere in the distant future, even a few months ago, but they'll be held next year in the UK. I'm certainly one who is wondering what is going to happen with Prince Harry and Meghan. There's a concept in the field of psychology called the shared fantasy. I'm not a psychologist. No. But when I came across this information, I thought about some of my own experiences, because this all started with me working out things that had happened in my life. But it also reminded me of Harry and Meghan's relationship, because if you think about how they met, this shared fantasy concept, it has to do with not just a narcissistic relationship. It has to do with the narcissist drawing the person that they're targeting in, creating this fairy tale that has nothing to do with reality. If the person they're targeting needs something, the narcissist can become that. And there are other facets like the dual mothership component. And when you consider the fact that in this relationship, we had Harry saving Meghan in her own words.
May the dragon save the princess.
But on the other hand, her giving the illusion that she was aligned so closely with Diana and the causes that she cared about. Prince Harry talks about this so much in the Netflix series, how when he first met her, that he could see that there was so much about her that reminded him of his mother. But I want to give you a scenario here to illustrate how these two met. Imagine this fairy tale. There's a little boy over here in his world. He's a prince. His mother is a beautiful princess. And then there's a little girl far away over here in her little world, and she wants to be a princess. This little boy grew up in palaces and castles. He was part of this world this little girl had always dreamed of being a part of. Sadly, this little boy's mother, she died, and he was too young to cope with that loss. And this little girl, she had been so fascinated with this princess. Now, this story continues being a fairy tale for this little girl, but for anyone else, it doesn't look very much like a fairy tale, because this little boy grows up and he wants to save a princess. And this little girl, she was fascinated by that beautiful princess, but it wasn't just a fascination. The people around her called it an obsession, because it never ended, even as she grew older and into adulthood. This little boy and this little girl both grew up never having resolved those issues. And then they met. That's how Prince Harry and Meghan's story begins. And I'm going to talk about that partly because of these recent stories about Prince Harry returning to the UK. Will Meghan come with him? Will Prince Harry reconcile with his father? Everyone is talking about it. There are so many stories about it. If you want the scoop, here it is. Nobody knows. So instead of speculating about what might happen, let's talk about the concept of the shared fantasy. They came together, Harry and Meghan, not as two grounded people ready to form a partnership, but as two halves trying to create something that was whole. Two broken people can never come together and complete one another. They just form a broken relationship between two broken people. Narcissists don't target grounded people. They target people who need something. And conveniently for Meghan, Harry needed something. Just months before they met, Prince Harry had shared details of his struggle accepting the death of his mother, about his grief. And before they met, Meghan had made a couple of trips to Africa with a full wardrobe and hair and makeup team and photographer, and had photos indicating that she had done some humanitarian work where Diana had also worked. And she'd even happened to take photos wearing the same clothes in the same pose as Diana in some of her candid photos. What a coincidence. So by the time Prince Harry and Meghan met, I would say the stage was set for the possibility of a shared fantasy to take shape. But remember, Meghan wants to be a princess and Harry needs to save a princess. But to save her, she has to be in danger. Because otherwise, what is there to save her from? And when the prince rides in and slays the dragon and saves the princess, they don't go from there and work and pay bills and raise children and do all the things we wake up and do every day. Where do they go? They go off into the sunset. That's where the story ends in fairy tales. But in a real life situation where the fantasy ends, reality sets in. The narcissist doesn't want the fantasy to end. And if Meghan is a narcissist, I obviously believe she is, this would explain so many things. Because she has to keep this going. She has to remain a princess. She has to be in perpetual distress. Remember the name change? Remember the abrupt... Nobody saw it coming. When Meghan asked Mindy Kaling why she was calling her Meghan Markle, saying, you know it's Sussex now. No, we did not know that, Meghan. Nobody has ever called you that before in your life. You've never even called yourself that. I don't believe Mindy Kaling saw it coming. I don't know. Unlike Meghan, she actually is a good actress. So maybe... that reaction really was faked. Maybe it was part of the script for that episode. But yeah, she made a big deal that her last name was Sussex. It never was. And then all these photos of her cosplaying Princess Diana, that's been going on since before she met Harry. And it's also not old news. This most recent one, this was published 3 months ago. At this point, anybody who calls this respect, I say you're either willfully ignorant or a troll. Either way, we can't have a conversation about it. This is creepy. Look at this. In my last video, I talked about how being obsessed with Diana didn't mean she loved Diana. She resented her. And just like she's both resentful of Diana and obsessed with achieving that level of fame and adoration, knowing she'll never do it, she's resentful of the monarchy. But she also loves the monarchy. She must, because she can't give up that title. But if she rejected the monarchy outright, she wouldn't be a duchess. And her daughter wouldn't be a little princess. Remember the Oprah interview. In one sitting, Meghan very artfully did two things. She did not call the royal family racists. And she left every single person who watched that interview, including Oprah, with the clear impression that the royal family were racists. She also talked about Archie and Lily not being given prince and princess titles. But why would she want her children to have those titles? Why would she want her children carrying titles associated with this monarchy, with this institutional racism that she was fighting against and accepted an award that she paid for having done so? What did Meghan actually resent about royal life? Because I don't think it was about being ranked. Remember she said, I'd rather be linked than ranked. No, what you'd really rather is to rank highest in all the land, like in all the fairy tales, right? She married into the heart of the royal family. She's not some distant cousin twice removed. She's the daughter-in-law and sister-in-law of the king and the future king. She didn't resent the idea of rank. She resented the fact that there would always be one person ahead of her in processions, in the official order of things. And it didn't matter if 100 women walked behind her. There would always be that one woman in front of her. And it was Catherine, the woman who hadn't taken Diana's place. But as far as Meghan is concerned, she might as well have. And that's enough for Meghan to say, if I can't eclipse her, I'll spend every bit of my energy undermining her. For Meghan to be a princess who needs to be saved, she needs to be in distress. And to be in distress, she has to have enemies. And when it comes to enemies in this shared fantasy, we can't talk about the royal family without also talking about the British press. In Meghan's world, all of the press is hostile. They're not just hostile, they're working with the royal family against her. Infamy, infamy. They've all got an infamy. Maybe I'm giving away my age by referencing that. Harry is going back to the UK. The Invictus Games are coming up next year. That trip represents a threat to this shared fantasy. When I say Meghan is terrified, it's because there's no good way around this for her. Think about Meghan's position here. If she goes with him, she risks the UK not being as hostile as she claimed. She risks people being cordial, or him just seeing his father and old friends and realizing how much he misses that, questioning whether the finality of cutting those relationships off completely was really necessary. He's at a fork in this road. Does he stay in this fantasy and keep playing this role Or does he start asking the questions he's been avoiding? Does he wake up and start seeing the reality of it all? Time will tell. It is the inevitability of time that Meghan cannot escape, that none of us can. There's all this speculation about the Invictus Games for a reason, because we're going to see if that's what finally brings this fantasy, dream, nightmare to an end. The fantasy will not hold forever. It never does. It'll work for a while, and he got to be the hero, and she got to be the princess. He slayed the dragons. They rode off into the sunset, or to Canada. See, it doesn't matter how fantastical a fantasy is. Reality will always destroy it. Think of the best dream you ever had in your life. I remember the best dream I ever had. Do you remember? But we had to wake up from that dream, as beautiful as it was, because what was the alternative? We either had to wake up from that dream or die there. The shared fantasy collapses when that dream fades, and what we're seeing now fits that pattern. So now here's the conundrum. If Meghan refuses to return to the UK, Harry is facing this choice. Does he stay with Meghan and keep this fantasy alive, or does he reconcile with his family and make sure that his children know their grandparents and aunts and uncles and cousins, even if Meghan refuses to participate? Because Meghan doesn't get to decide whether Harry includes the children in that reconciliation. And that could trigger a whole narcissistic implosion. I haven't even watched enough Sam Vaknin videos to understand what happens at that point. By the way, if you want to learn more about the shared fantasy, Sam Vaknin is a self-professed psychopathic narcissist, and he's a professor. He's taught at several universities. I have to watch Vaknin in spurts. As my grandma would say, a little bit of Vaknin goes a long way with me. He can be unsettling, but if you already have an interest in not just shared fantasy, but narcissism in general, he's a gold mine of information. He has everything from 2-hour long lectures posted on YouTube, and then he also has 15-minute videos where he breaks this down in simpler terms. Okay, guys, thank you for sharing a little of your time with me today. Please leave your comments. It's not about numbers. It's not about engagement. I don't want to get sucked into that whole thing with YouTube. I'm just happy they're here. Aren't you, YouTube? I'm just happy to read their comment anyway. So please do leave your comments, just because I want to hear what you have to say. So thank you. Thank you sincerely. Thank you for sharing a little of your time with me today. And until next time, take care.